substantive changes in the physical realm in that area. And then, of course, from that effort in the Forward Urbandale comp plan update came, of course, the full downtown master plan, which was more recently adopted in June of 2025. And some of the things in particular related to this contract and this project that it talked about was revising zoning regulations. So our downtown plan is great. It talks about pedestrian friendly places, mixed use development, all kinds of things you would want to see in a more dense urban environment, but also recognize that our regulations that are in place today in many cases really don't allow that, or they make it very challenging. So what can we do to actually implement the planning vision that both the comprehensive plan and the downtown master plan both envisioned? Another very big piece of this, and also aligns with other strategic goals, is what do we do in the transition areas in the neighborhood surrounding what we might think of more as that traditional commercial core? Are there opportunities in that area to think about other types of housing densities while still being sensitive to the existing neighborhood fabric? So this project also takes a look at that. And then also thinking a little bit differently about how changes to parking, locations, how public parking relates to private development can all play a role in really changing the physical built environment in downtown, as well as how people are utilizing it every day and how we hope they will utilize it in the future. So,
Rose?
Yes, ma'am.
I hate to interrupt, but am I the only one not seeing slides change? I'm still seeing the downtown zoning ordinance and streetscape update slide.
Okay, thank you. Give me a moment here. They are changing on my end.
I'm with you, Pat.
Okay, thanks. It's just you did a lot of work on those and we can't see them, so it seems a shame. I thought maybe I'd bring it up. Thank you. It's making progress now.
Okay, sorry, my apologies for that. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward through these real quickly and catch us up. Okay, so why now? You know, as we continue to think about how we make progress here, you know, there's a lot of other things going on in downtown. For one, our downtown branding effort, the city's overall commitment to what's happening downtown, some property acquisitions we have made, discussions about streets and infrastructure, and really the desire to how do we put those regulatory, primarily zoning, but regulatory supports in so that private development can actually accomplish those visions. And again, I've already touched on it, but there's been lots of policy work by city leadership and elected officials leading up to this point. So just a reminder, I always like to give when I'm talking about the difference between planning and zoning. So zoning, of course, is a tool, one of many tools to implement planning efforts. And just as a refresher for everyone, you know, land use policy, those vision and goals adopted through both the comp plan and the downtown master plan really are that. It's the vision, it sets a policy direction, but it does not change zoning and it is not regulatory. What it does do is inform the zoning piece of that, which is a tool that can be used for that implementation. And zoning, as we all know, it is the law. It is at some point the adopted regulation of the city. It's what city staff use to review projects, proposals, applications as they come in. It's probably in this context most commonly thought of the types of uses, the types of building setbacks, height, density, those types of items that you would commonly find in this type of district work. So that is really where we are now. We are starting on the text of what those zoning regulations might be in the future. So a few things I mentioned earlier that, you know, we have we have done some focus group outreach to date specifically on this, but also those other efforts that I mentioned have been asking the public and had very good response rates in the past about what should happen in downtown. Those were things from the master planning effort, more recently, even from the branding charrette that occurred a few months back. And so I've got up on the screen some of the things that our consultants pulled out that were on people's minds as we had those focus groups a few months back. You'll see some common themes here. The development and business realm are very interested in parking. You've got a little bit of resident perspective there about some residential use, and then even a few comments from city staff and council members at the time. One of the things I do just want to highlight that really has come through on all of the downtown engagement that has been to date, that has occurred today, even predating me back in the master plan, is that people really are looking for places to go and to linger. They're not looking for a one trip in, one trip out. They want to go, to a shop, they want to grab something to eat, they want to have a reason to be in that area. And I think that certainly came through in some of the comments we have received to date. This is just a word cloud again of keywords people are talking about when they talk about downtown. They want walkable, vibrant, unique places to stay, to spend some time. So that's kind of our, our jumping off point into this work, is not losing sight of all of the work that has been done to date. But also moving forward. So our downtown framework, which this is not particularly new, it's a little bit modified from the downtown plan, but it really talks about Douglas Avenue as that primary corridor. Everyone who's familiar with the downtown plan knows that we've identified these nodes there. And then we talk about the residential neighborhood fabric surrounding it. So one of the things just want to point out, and we'll talk about a little bit later, is that clearly focusing a lot of commercial and mixed use development on that Douglas Avenue corridor, as well as 70th Street, and that, other transitional residential uses, which we'll talk about kind of happening on the periphery. So when we're talking about what I will call the downtown district, I'm talking about that spine, the more commercial or mixed use type frontages. And so really we've trying to draft the framework for regulations that will emphasize active uses along those frontages, and clarifying some of those expectations for adaptive reuse, commercial infill, really trying to make those things possible, and for our regulations to fit those. That does, of course, mean that we do have to establish some of those traditional regulations like height, lot dimensions, and the other type of regulations you would expect to see in zoning. We've essentially done the same thing in the areas surrounding, which on this slide and throughout other documents we really haven't named yet, but we're referring to it as this residential transitional area. Transitional meaning in terms of density, allowing a mix of types of residential uses. You see just a display there up on the screen that could be some small cottage lots, that could be some townhouses, it could be a duplex, maybe even a triplex, but really thinking through how that can fit into the existing fabric of the neighborhood, because it's developed very much in a grid shaped pattern. Some of the lots are quite narrow, and so sometimes infill could be a little tricky in those spots, while still being sensitive to the existing types of housing that exists there today. One of the other pieces I will put up here briefly that we will circle back to in a moment is when we start looking at the commercial piece, the downtown district piece, the type of frontage that a property is on does make a bit of difference. A lot of the framework that we have put together is a departure from most of the remainder of the city's zoning regulations, meaning we start talking about building front lines in some cases as compared to a minimum setback line. We do talk about parking maximums as compared to parking minimums, and definitely some discussions about uses. So these types of districts we're talking about really are do demonstrate a significant shift from the way the rest of our zoning regulations are laid out. So just keep that in mind for later. And having said that, as we start talking about build two lines, parking, what's happening in that pedestrian environment, that's where the tie-in to the streetscape in the public realm really comes into play. You know, as infill or redevelopment happens, you know, there will be differences. There won't be a consistent urban edge, if you will, along the street. There's not one today in every place, and that may take some time to build that up. So there's a lot of things to think about as we start conceptualizing that streetscape plan. Our right-of-way width varies throughout the project area. When we think about how people might want to use this realm, right? When they want to linger, like how does that relate for places that might want to provide outdoor dining? What is it? What, you know, everything to what does your door swing look like when you perhaps park on street on Douglas? And then of course the more traditional things like lighting, signage, what other types of treatments will we have in the built environment. So this is not the end of the presentation, but I'm going to switch over to a different file. But one of the things I did want to cover before I do that is, first of all, in terms of overall next steps, first and foremost, tomorrow we have a public open house. It will be in the former Green State Credit Union building, so right in our planning area. That open house is from 5:30 to 7. There will be a brief presentation at 5:30, but it certainly is come and go as people may like. In order to publicize the event, we have had a Facebook event created for quite some time. Communications has included it in the newsletter that has been going out. Our economic development folks have pushed it out through their various email distribution lists. And then last week, we direct mailed postcards to give or take about 800 properties in the general vicinity. We'll also have an A-frame sign out in front of the location tomorrow, just so people know, you know, that they're in the right place. And if people, for whatever reason, haven't heard about it and they see that sign and they're in the area, they can stop in. So that is the literal next thing that is going to happen. But also from here, where we go next is once we accomplish and complete the public open house tomorrow, that's really going to allow us to have that next set of public feedback specifically on the zoning components of this. And then we will be able to move into more specifically getting into more detailed framework. So can someone just let me know, are you seeing something that is blue and white on your screen and says Urbandale zoning?
We are.
Okay, thank you. I'm still not entirely sure what is happening with my screens. So one of the things I wanted to start with here, this is a little bit, I know that's a whole lot of text on screens. I don't expect anyone to read it all. It's going to be a little bit of a sneak peek of what we will be talking about tomorrow. But the reason I've included this one to share with you today is that I think it's very important. One of the things we really want to talk with the public about and get feedback on tomorrow, particularly, are uses. And so what's up on this screen are things that we have heard in the past. So they're very active uses. That's nothing surprising. They're things, consumer services type things. But what I want to point out is that, anytime we do a zoning change, or certainly a text amendment ordinance change that relates to uses, we have the potential to create nonconformities and to bring certain uses into conformance. And I think it's important to just be aware of that as we really start having the use conversations, because some of the things, at least leading up to this point, that people have really weighed in on, that they're not particularly interested in seeing, perpetuate or continue long term in this area, are a lot of auto-oriented uses. Now that may seem like, well, yeah, you're trying to create a pedestrian environment. Of course, they wouldn't want to see a lot of that. But there are real implications to that, because we do have several auto-oriented uses already in this area. So depending on what the end result of those allowable uses are, we may end up with some legal non-conforming uses for a time. So I just, for the council's benefit, want to make sure that that's clear. Anytime we go striking uses or adding uses, we have the potential to create those scenarios. So I just wanted to be sure to point that out, because I'm sure that's a conversation that we will have throughout the remainder of the process. Up on your screen now, there is a map on the left. I don't want people to get too caught up on those literal boundaries. This is very much conceptual. This is not about where zoning district boundaries go. This is kind of the wide net, that we have cast. So as I've been talking about downtown, meaning the more commercial or mixed use, it's really that darker brown area in the middle of that map, and sort of that transitional residential area around it. I think for me, a real question as we continue to move forward, in particular, is where do those residential lines start and stop? This is literally just a polygon drawn around it. I think there's a lot more nuance to, at some point, where those lines really go. And I think it's also important to point out that, at least to my knowledge, leading up to this point, other than general conversations about increasing density and allowing for some more flexibility in residential types in this area, I don't know that we've had a lot of public comment about the residential pieces of this. Now, I may be wrong about that, but I have not read them, at least. So, again, as I mentioned, none of these standards are set in stone yet. We have to have a starting place. Generally speaking, with the public, when it comes to zoning regulations, having something for them to respond or react to is usually a lot more productive than just asking the open-ended question. How close should buildings be together? That's typically not incredibly productive in my experience. So we will put some of these things out there for people to react to, because we also hope to have conversations with them tomorrow evening. So this is one of the things that will also represent a significant shift. We are suggesting that non-residential uses would not have any minimum off-street parking requirements. The city, of course, does have some public parking in the area. We are looking at on-street parking, so that is a significant shift than we have had in the past. So I want to point that out as well. We are also proposing maximums for residential uses, also a departure from what we have done in other districts. And I think some people might think like, well, why would we do that? Well, we're really trying to be able to maximize development potential in this area. And every bit of land is valuable and hopefully will become more so as time and interest goes on. And so if we can think creatively and provide other strategies for providing parking that don't take up available land area for buildings and building footprints and other uses, we think that is the direction to move into. I think this will also be very interesting to see what kind of public response we have from that kind of shift in thinking. So I point that out, something that I will particularly be looking to hear more information tomorrow evening on. Frontage types, again, this is going to relate to those commercial uses. So we've called things out a bit differently. Primary frontages, which is again that Douglas Avenue and 70th, and then kind of other secondary, more the side streets, if you will. And it's really one of the primary purposes for that is that we really want to see active uses on that primary frontage. So even if we have a mixed use building per se, for example, fronting on Douglas, we want those main floor spaces to be active. So in other words, we wouldn't want to see necessarily a standalone kind of multifamily building there with no active spaces on that storefront, right? We're trying to create that pedestrian friendly, something to do in the corridor type of uses. And this is also calls out again to that point about a build to zone. And we're not suggesting a hard and fast number, but we are proposing that there is a range in there that allows still for some unique design, right, of individual users, buildings, and how they want to present those. But it is sending the message that buildings do need to be pulled to the front of the street, particularly along those primary frontages. And this is just a rendering that talks about some of the terminology that we will have there tomorrow. Again, trying to create some interest in adjacent to that public realm, not just blank walls. Then we transition into, again, more of that residential conversation. Again, don't take too literally the lines that are on here. We have proposed even sort of 2 iterations of this. You'll notice the orange, I will call it, is along 70th, and then the brown kind of in the surrounding area. We've broken this out for some discussion in that for the majority of this space, or however it would be shown eventually, we're thinking about those more middle density, they could be still single family detached. It could be duplexes, maybe some triplexes, fitting into the overall fabric of the neighborhood. But then those orange spaces, we are hoping to have a conversation that may be where if there was going to be a smaller multifamily building that may be along, again, kind of that more primary corridor, that type of use may be appropriate. Excuse me. And then the next few I'm just going to preview really are an exercise in studying what some different cross sections of the streetscape could look like. And I will mention that these all still say transitional residential at the top, which is not accurate. But so Confluence primarily Confluence, but along with our other consultant, have looked at what are different ways to make the use of right-of-way that we already have. Do we need additional right-of-way? Making sure that we have a pedestrian zone, and then also kind of that utility zone, right, where there might be streetlights or there might be signs or other utility type things that might need to be between parking and that pedestrian zone. It also allows, for some door swing, And the study also includes, if we do all those things, how much area do we have left to do any planting? And is that a very repetitive type of planting, or is that planting reserved for more meaningful impact areas? And meaning, do we want all these little skinny planter beds, which will be somewhat limited in what can be done there, or would we rather more strategically place them to have something a bit more impactful? They've also looked at, different types of parking, what that does to right-of-way needs, what are the pros and cons of that, particularly on the side streets. Is it perpendicular? Is it angled? Is it parallel? Again, these are all kind of just general studies, the pros and cons of, how do we continue to increase potentially parking in the area. So looked at a variety of cross sections on that. With some bump outs, with some potential medians. Of course, all of this equals right of way, and how do we get utilities and stormwater in the mix as well as we're looking at this. So again, all of this will be available tomorrow evening and for discussion, but I did just want to give you a quick look at it today. I should also mention, as it relates to the public open house tomorrow, that following that event, the presentation that is given at the beginning of the event, as well as any of the display boards, digital images, those will all be posted to the city's website, where sort of all of the downtown work is being collected. There is an email submittal tab there to submit comments and feedback on that website, which come to me. You'll notice as I've been scrolling through these boards, there is a QR code, which for folks that are there tomorrow, if they want to do something right on the fly, can scan and leave a comment just directly there. We'll also, in addition to having these boards up around the perimeter, and having staff there as well as our consultants to talk through those things, we will also have a couple of tabletop exercises, which we will staff to have people available to have conversations about everything from uses to how do you think these things fit together, and kind of all of the above. So once the event concludes tomorrow, we will make all of that available. And then moving forward, as we're more into drafting, the actual literal code drafting things will also be made available on the website for people to provide comment even as we're working along through those. So that is what I have by way of an update for you today. I am happy to answer any questions or take any general feedback. Again, I'm sorry, my screens are, I'm not sure what they're doing exactly, but hopefully you can still see a slide. And I'm happy to take any question you might have.
I just like to say this looks really thoughtful. It's really thoughtful and well laid out to spark conversation.
So as I understand, the steps are to get more public feedback, and then at some point bring some of these zoning changes before the council, the public hearings, correct?
Yes, so this really will be the first time that the broad public will have seen the literal zoning kind of framework conversations. Up to this point, it's been about vision, et cetera. So the literal steps in this, once we get to what we think is a draft of the zoning pieces, yes, those would go through a text amendment process effectively. So it would start with planning commission, public hearings, make its way to council in public hearings. And then the one distinction I just want to make clear, and particularly with the public, is that even once the council takes some action on some version of these regulations, those regulations are in effect, but they would still have to be applied by way of a zoning map amendment to our actual map. So this would set the text up. But for example, if we create this new district called, I don't know, the downtown core, that would then exist in text form, but it would not exist on the ground until we also went through a public hearing process as we would with any proposed zoning change. So even if when the council takes some effect, I think it's important for the public to know that, you know, this doesn't automatically rezone your property. There are still many steps and public hearing process that would need to happen before that would take place. I think sometimes there's concern that from folks that you know don't work in that process all the time, that you know if they see the council takes an action on this, that all of a sudden that applies to their property. So there will be multiple steps. This is just the first part, and that's why I say I want to be a little bit cautious. It's always a little bit scary to show any kind of map, because even if it's just a conceptual map, the first thing people want to do, and it's human nature, I would do it too, is walk up to that map and see where the property that maybe I own or have an interest in is, and what does it say about it. So staff will be there certainly to have those conversations, but just, you know, if those kinds of comments or questions are coming up, please do direct them to us.
Thank you, that's helpful. I saw that there were a couple of comments from developers relating to parking. I don't want to get ahead of our process, but I guess what, you know, what is your thinking on how we're going to solve that problem?
You know, I think the parking, I think that we get parking comments in two very polar opposite directions. I'm speaking just in a day to day. So we have some folks that say, oh, you require too much parking. That's, you know, that's going to kill our project. We don't need so much parking. We know what parking we need. And then we have some that say, like, you know, parking's a real challenge, and not having enough parking is the real issue. And I suspect as much as anything that sentiment depends on the type of use, right, that they are talking about. And so I think, as with a lot of things, I think it's the balance somewhere in the middle. I think that you know, the city has assembled some property which includes parking. I think we are looking to maximize on-street parking we can, but in a responsible way. And so I think that also represents a bit of a departure to part of this planning area. You know, we don't have a ton of on-street parking. Well, in some people's opinion, we don't have a ton of on-street parking. So I think there are some of those changes that will occur, but I think the other real challenge to just be mindful of is that, you know, a lot of projects here presumably will be redevelopment projects. We don't have a lot of just vacant parcels there. So as projects come in, that's when we'll need to look at this. So we can't sort of carte blanche go through and, you know, remove curb cuts so that we can maximize on-street parking. So some of this will very much be incremental. Those changes will happen over time, especially with regard to the on-street parking. Like, you know, it depends on how much of a project walks through the door at any, you know, at any one kind of given time. We aren't starting from a blank slate, and so sometimes that transition is also difficult for people to envision.
Last question, Rose. Does the open house include information about what we're doing with, you know, Douglas Avenue restriping?
We don't specifically have anything for that purpose. I don't know if John is on. I know they had Public Works had a couple public events about that. We can certainly have some information or some contact references for people there. And one of the things that we are working on, and I appreciate Derek very much for this, is We are and have started kind of retooling the spot on the city's website where a lot of the kind of previous downtown efforts lived, to kind of update them because there are so many more current things going on. So I think that's also a place we can continue to build that. And then if there's anything Derek has taught me, it's the consistent messaging of where to drive people so that it becomes a habit of where to look for downtown information. And Derek, I don't want to put you on the spot, but when he and I were talking about this, that site is getting a lot of hits and a lot of clicks. And that was before we were really advertising anything new on it. So people are going there for whatever reason it is. There have definitely been some spikes on the viewership of that page, even before this last few weeks.
Yeah, which page is that? I'm sorry, I want to make sure.
If you go to urbandale.org/downtown, that'll direct you there.
Okay,
And
got it.
it's the most popular, it's the second most popular page on our website right now. So
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further questions or comments on this?
I had a question about in the section you had for residential parking. Was that specifically talking about like on lot parking?
Yes.
Talking
So
or lots, like spots in front of the building, or
so any of the information, that's a good distinction. So any of the parking requirements that will end up in the zoning code per se are all going to relate to on private property, not in the public right of way or not on publicly owned properties. So that would be, yes, if you were developing a little project that was residential in nature, that would be the parking calculation for your parking requirement on the property that you control, as the framework is laid out today. I think that will be another interesting discussion to continue to have with the public. Like I said, we hear that both directions sometimes. Oh, this is far too much parking, or oh, we don't want to have any parking here. And we know that the answer is somewhere in the middle, right? So
okay. And then when we're talking about public parking, I don't think we've had any conversations about like time restricted or anything like that. It sounded more like we were going to kind of see what happened before we have any of those type of conversations.
yeah, that has not been part of any conversation related to this effort.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Anything further to go to the order? Well, you get about 25 minutes of your life back. So we are done. We are at the end of the agenda. I will adjourn the meeting.
Hey, can
What?
I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Any items that may have been on last night's plan and zoning agenda, when will we see those at the council?
Any that were public hearings, which was not all of them, but any of the public hearings will be September 1st, because we have to provide public notice of that public hearing again. Items, for example, site plans, things that are not public hearings will be on your next meeting.
Thank you for that clarification, Rose.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.